This is an us thing. We are foster parents. And I was like, yeah, you and dad are. I'm 7. And my mom said very clearly, kids who need love do not care how old you are. So we are all foster parents.
Hey friends, welcome to Keep It Simple Sexy. I'm Christine Bullock, founder of KO Body Care, certified fitness trainer, and mom of 3 little girls who's just trying to juggle it all and feel as good as possible, all while helping you do the same. I'm so grateful that you're here. Now let's get started, sexy. Hi everyone, I'm so excited to speak to our next guest because even if adoption isn't a blimp on your interest radar, this man is one of the most engaging, genuine people I have ever heard speak and just met in life. And he's about to get you excited about living. Hank Fortner is a speaker, entrepreneur, activist, husband, and daddy of 2 adorable, smart little girls. He has spoken to audiences around the world at a TEDx conference and through podcasts that have been downloaded by over 1 million listeners. Hank currently serves as general manager of artist management at Rock Nation, while also founding AdoptTogether.org, the world's first and largest crowdfunding site for adoption costs. In its 10 years, AdoptTogether.org has helped over 5,000 families raise over $28 million to cover adoption expenses and bring their children home forever. Welcome to the show, friend.
Thank you. Very excited to be here. Very excited to be here.
No pressure.
I love your take on Keep It Simple Sexy, which is so much nicer than Keep It Simple Stupid.
Well, it's funny because my mom actually growing up always said, keep it simple, stupid. And I think I had a button or something like that too. And I was like, let's spin this a little bit. Yeah.
That's much better. As we evolve as a species, we're no longer referring to each other as stupid, which
that's great. It's right.
Yeah,
that is the evolution of it. Only once in a while with my husband. I'm just kidding.
There you go. Every now and then.
Hank knows Bob very well.
Marriage is not evolving at the same pace. So we
yeah, totally. Well, I mean, this whole episode, everybody's heard my personal journey in the dedicated episode of adoption, through IG, through little parts, through our other episodes. But I wanted to bring you in because, first of all, just to hear you speak is absolutely amazing. But your journey to get to Adopt Together and your experiences of foster and adoption are so different than mine. And I want people to hear, I know so many people that are interested in adoption, but have fears. And I feel like to hear all the sides of it, this is perfect for anyone, everybody.
All the sides. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so, yes, being a manager of Rock Nation has plenty of interesting stories, I'm sure. But I'd love to hear about the many sides of foster and adoption and basically just backing it up and telling, your history with it.
Awesome. I'll go all the way to the beginning.
Please.
I was born and raised in a state certified foster home in Dayton, Ohio. My parents had 3 of us biologically and then sat us down, and my mom said that God put her on earth to be a mother. And my dad said that God put him on earth to make my mom happy. So they sat us down and my mom said, I'm here to be a mom. Pregnancy was really hard for my mom. It was like bed rest kind of things and like a risk to her body. And so the doctor said, okay, no more kids after 3. And my mom said, when my little brother was born, she just started sobbing. Like, I was put on earth to be a mother. How could I stop at 3? And my dad's dad was adopted. So my dad, being the caretaker that he is and the kind person that he is, said, oh, we can always adopt, because my dad had adoption in his mind because he'd recently found out about a year earlier that his dad was adopted, who was my grandfather, which he didn't know his entire life until my mom was pregnant with us. And he said, we can always adopt. So she goes, okay, cool. They looked into it. Adoption turned out to be extremely expensive. But and it's a long process, but foster care was immediate. So my dad said, okay, let's start foster care. So my mom sits us down. I'm like 7, my little brother's 4, and my sister is 9. And she says, we're going to be foster parents. And I remember as a kid being like, why are my parents like informing us? Like, what is this meeting we're having? And she said, no, we are doing this together. This is an us thing. We are foster parents. And I was like, yeah, you and dad are. I'm 7. And my mom said very clearly, kids who need love do not care how old you are. So we are all foster parents. And I need you on this team. I mean, she recruited us to her team. And sure enough, we took that very seriously. We took care of over 36 kids over a 7-year period. I was just as engaged as any parent would be. We changed diapers. We put kids to bed. We pushed strollers. We did everything you can imagine for foster care. So over that 7-year period, we had kids for 2 weeks at a time through respite care. And then we'd have kids for 2 months or 2 years, 2.5 years at a time. And so
what did that do to you? I mean, even as a child, having someone in there for 2 weeks that you would bond with slightly, 2 years, like you're saying, as they would leave.
Yeah, 2 weeks is fun because you're like, okay, cool. We got like a kid for 2 weeks. Oh, whatever. All right, good to see you. It's like a vacation for that kid in our household. And our house was wild because there's so many people. We lived on an acre of land, and my brother and I built forts. And a kid would come to us sometimes as babies for respite care. Most respite care is babies. But if it was an older kid, it's like, we got a 4-year-old. This is going to make this kid's life, right?
Yeah.
It was the 2 years at a time that was the most traumatic for our family, and I think traumatic for the kids in our family, because a child would come to us from a situation that required foster care, which is never positive. Like, I speak about the positive elements of adoption and the redemptive elements of adoption because there's been a crisis and a tragedy and something sad that happened to need it. So foster care and adoption are not positive outcomes. They are healing, hopefully healing processes to damage that's already occurred someplace. And so we would take little kids who would come in and be afraid of my dad's deep voice, and they would be afraid of men. And so they would only trust the kids because of the abuse that had occurred. And then they learn to trust and learn to be stable. And then the phone call comes from the social worker and says, hey, we're going to move him to a next of kin. And you're like, he doesn't know that person. He doesn't know that environment. We just got him willing to eat in front of us. Like, what do you like? So the systems are not built on anything individual. It's all built on just ones and zeros, or it was in the 80s. And I think it's equally as disappointing now.
I know someone who's been going through it now, and it was disappointment in a way. Yeah.
And it's not human. So I get that as a process, but you should be able to call somebody and say, hey, he needs more time. We need more time. And you can't do that. So that's part of the reason we stopped, is because that was so traumatic to us as a family, to just watch these kids get literally physically ripped out of my mom's hands. We had a reputation for not letting kids go too quickly. We wanted to say goodbye on our time. So they would also send a cop, or they would send another person. And it's like, we just wanted to give it space. You can't tell a kid, you got to process a child. Like, they're doing the same thing that the foster care system needed or was doing to them. The same trauma. Now the foster care system that's supposed to be healing or reunifying is now bringing that same trauma. So that was just, a really, really hurtful system. So when people come to me now and they're like, hey, we're really thinking about being foster parents, man, anybody who's been a foster parent is going to take a deep breath and be like, you need to know what you're signing up for.
Yeah.
You're signing up for an impermanent solution, which is by definition ineffective in helping a child heal and find permanence.
And being so completely selfless, which you kind of think you know, but you don't know until you're like, you truly are there just to support and help. And you have to deal with that pain of what you've seen in the child, of what you take on, of then the child potentially leaving. If, it's not a foster to adopt situation, it's literally just selfless.
It's almost maybe a little self-inflicting.
Yeah.
You meet a foster parent who knows what they're doing. That person is like a soldier with PTSD. I almost liken it to, the story of the sin eater? There's an old story of the sin eater where I think the idea of the sin eater was, and it's Good Friday, it's Easter weekend. The idea was that God is the ultimate sin eater. And what would happen is somebody would have a limp, and that person would come along and they would meet Jesus, and then Jesus would start limping and they'd start walking straight, but Jesus keeps limping. And then somebody would walk through and they have a broken arm, and then they would interact with Jesus and his arm would be broken, but they would be straight. And where that might not be like theologically or philosophically correct, that is what it's like to be a foster parent. Is you take on the trauma and the burden and the hurt and the cuts, and then you move on, and the child moves on, and you hope that your impact has made a difference, which we know it does. I have a little brother, there's a little boy who was with us for 2.5 years. I won't say his name on this podcast. I'll let him say his name later, but he was with us for 2.5 years. He was relocated into a situation that was violent and abusive. And when he turned 18 years old, he went to jail. He's been in jail now for 12 years. He has 4 more years left on his sentence. About every year, I would search for him. He was probably the hardest one for us to say goodbye to, for me, just for my age and how bonded we were. When he came to us, he had curling iron burns on his forehead because when he would cry, his mother's boyfriend would hold the curling iron to his head to calm him down. So his whole forehead was burnt. And I'm Googling once a year trying to find the guy, and my mom sends me a screenshot of a mugshot, and she said I Googled his like a old address and it popped up. So sure enough, I called somebody who called somebody who called somebody, and I'm on the phone with the guy like 5 days later or so. And so I get to send him packages. He's about 4 more years left on his sentence. And I've gotten, he's only able to call on Saturdays. So when he does call, then I add a different person to the phone line, and we only have 15 minutes at a time. And so it's been really cool to hear him talk about our family in a way that I can't believe he remembers everything he remembers. I can't believe he remembers all the names that he remembers. So it does help. But to go back to your point about being selfless, you just, your mental health is not even a player in the game. You just have to accept whatever being a foster parent allows, and you hope you've done what best you could do for somebody that had nothing else.
Yeah. Well, I know that at some point too, because of going through this, you guys started the foster to adopt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then we basically said, time out. We got to stop with the influences affecting us, and we took.
How many kids at this point had you just fostered?
36.
Oh.
So we said,
imagine the weight of that on your heart,
right? That you just like names and faces. And if you look at like old Christmas photos, when you go through all the Christmas photos, there's literally every Christmas is 3 or 4 different.
I love that.
My favorite analogy is the breakfast table, because this sometimes would happen while I was asleep or at baseball practice, whatever. So I'd come to the table to sit down, and I'd be like, who's this? And then there'd be a chair, someone's missing, and someone's in that person's chair, and then there's like another high chair, so you got another high chair. It's like, all right, here we go. It just was life. It wasn't even
a beautiful lesson.
We had a meeting about that. We had a meeting when I was 7, and then we had another meeting when I was 14. Like, okay, we're going to start adopting. So we started that process, and my parents fostered to adopt my little sister, Hope, and then from Hope, they adopted my little sister, Gabby, and then Matthew, and then Brendan, and then Lauren, and then Charlie. And now my parents have 8 kids from 5 different countries that are in our family. So we have 11 total. I have 5 brothers and 5 sisters.
It's amazing to see your family photos. It's just beautiful. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so what was that process like for you? I guess all of the adoptions were younger than you were at that point.
Yes. Yeah. Everybody was younger. Adoption is slower, but more permanent. And so it has its arcs, right? Like with foster care, it was fast. You'd get a phone call. There's a child in a high chair and someone's dropping off bags, and you just go, okay. And then they leave fast. So you don't really get a chance to do what a family should do, which is to grow and develop and increase not only the taking care of a child, but the permanence develops IQ, emotional intelligence. All of that increases. You watch it happen like a laboratory. You'd watch a kid get smarter, get quicker, think harder. If you you can find all this. There's 40 IQ points available between the ages of 0 and 5 years old. If a child is neglected or malnourished or is not taken care of, loved, hugged, touched, wrestled with, picked up, you lose 20 to 30 of those IQ points. 30 IQ points is the difference between, say, an 8th grader and a master's degree,
Wow.
so a master's degree educated person. So imagine losing that bandwidth.
Wow.
You're literally watching kids get smarter. You're watching kids be more articulate, grow in their vocabulary, their speed, their confidence, their voice, everything. Then to be moved again, you just sort of reset that cycle. Adoption is slower.
It's almost scarier too if you think about the emotional toll on that of being moved after you've had something like that and what that then affects too. You know what I mean? There's hope in it, but there's also like this pure sadness of like, but that could be ripped from you at any point, and what that then ensues
and then it
later
creates
on.
that lifelong anxiety. By the time if a child ages out of the foster care system in the U.S., they've been in an average of 55 homes.
Yeah.
So you do the math on moving 55 times. You just no longer trust adults. You don't trust authority. You don't trust adults, and you really don't care what anybody says to you or whatever structure they build, because all that structure is used to affect you. So in our prison system in the United States, 80% of prisoners in the U.S. have touched our foster care system. And when you live in it and you're in the middle of it, you're like, of course it does. Why would you? Well, you're gonna not steal? Stealing is the only way you ate, or the only way someone is telling you not to do something. That same someone is gonna move you right away, or that same someone abused you, or that same someone, you just don't. We hand young kids the wrong raw materials, and then we're mad that they build things with it. And it's not fair to those kids. And I'm not making any case for anyone in jail who did a wrong thing. I'm just saying, given the same raw materials, there are many of us who would have made the same choices.
Yeah, I think it comes back to, we talk about this with the charity all the time, but to change society, before we're really thinking about all of the other ways that we hear government, it just comes down to love, to loving a child and literally changing it right at the base there, like you said. And we're going to change, not only the jail systems. I know that the women that are working on the streets, there's a big percentage that were also through foster care, that kind of stuff, just really stopping and starting there. And I think even I know that some of your sister and brothers, and you talk about this too, some of them had trajectories where they said, well, they're not going to be able to work, or they're not going to be able to do this or that. And none of that was true because of the love of your family. If you want to tell maybe just a little bit about any of them. Yeah, totally.
I think for what I was saying about even the speed of foster care, it's fast. And it's not permanent, whereas adoption takes a minute, and then you get there, and then you go, okay, cool. And then you're in it for life. So you're watching that growth happen. You're watching that growth occur, much to the chagrin of like the experts who would say, oh, they're not going to make it past the 4th grade, and then they can graduate high school. We have my little sister Hope. They literally said 4th grade education. She's fetal alcohol syndrome, likely, maybe top. And she's got challenges. She was dealt an intellectual deck of cards that does make it harder for her. It's not her fault. It wasn't. It is what she was given. But to be able to be in a structured environment that will surround her with those resources. She's employee of the month at her job. She graduated from high school with a diploma. So I think you watch what happens when you create that permanent structure and when you lay out the resources needed for that child to be able to do it. And this is true for every society. Every society, kids are the most vulnerable. Every society, kids are the ones that are going to need the most protection and the most resources and the most security, because otherwise you have kids who are breathing toxic air and will die of indoor fires around the world. They'll die of malnutrition. Their children can't care for themselves. It's a fundamental evolutionary reality. So because of that, it requires us to build structures and systems that sort of help them find their way. And the evolutionary way to do that is through a family. You've got to have a family system and a family structure. So in large part, most of the way that we take care of kids on the planet is piecemeal. They need water. Okay, let's get water there. They need healthcare. Let's get healthcare. Let's get all these things. But really, if you get a child into a family, our societies are designed to support family ecosystems. It's why even the way you pay taxes as a joint filing and you slate dependents. It's designed for that ecosystem. That's what I think, why I'm so passionate is I feel like if we can protect those kids, we have a better world and a better society that we're all a part of.
You're changing it from the ground up. The Keep It Simple, Sexy podcast is brought to you by KO Body Care. By now, you guys know I'm all about simple wellness habits. And the most important habit, in my opinion, is eating lots of fruits and veggies to boost your immunity and feel energized and youthful. The only problem, if you're as busy as I am, you're probably eating a lot of meals on the run. So I'm going to fill you in on my favorite hack. KO Body Care's clean, plant-based supplements. As the founder and CEO of KO Body Care, we spent so long getting these formulas perfect, and our customers are just as obsessed with them as I am. Our bestseller right now is our Vital Green Superfood Powder Drink Mix. Every scoop contains 25 superfoods that optimize your cellular health and performance. There's organic greens, antioxidant-rich berries, curcumin and immune complex, and so much more. Unlike most green powders, this one doesn't taste like grass, guys. It's got a sweet berry flavor that even my kids love. Seriously, my oldest asks for it every day. Vital Green Superfood Powder is a staple in my pantry and in the KO collection, and when you try it, you'll know why. Order yours today at kobodycare.com and make sure to use your special code KISS20 for 20% off your first purchase. How did then AdoptTogether come about? I mean, you went from growing up in that family, having a different career path, basically, but also then creating AdoptTogether.
Yeah.
Well, focusing on a
We
career.
didn't mean for this to be so. I think the best way to start anything is this is what I want to do.
Blindly a little bit, yeah.
I know what I can control, right? Whenever somebody comes to me and I work in artist management, so people will come and go, and they make some big external thing. I want to win an Oscar. I want to win a Grammy. Really what you should do is write music. That's what you can control. I can't control a committee of people that choose. I can't control the Academy and what award they'll give. You can control the music you make. And so I remember calling my dad because I had a friend who cornered me and said, hey, how did your parents afford adoption? Because we're looking into it. We were newly married. It was a friend I was in graduate school with. We're newly married. You know how expensive it is to adopt? I was like, I was 22. I was like, I don't know how expensive it is to adopt. And he's like, it's very expensive. It's like $50,000 US. We were both in graduate school. I was like, that sounds terrible. So I called my dad and I was like, hey, how did you pay for all those adoptions? He's like, we figured it out. We lived well below our means and so on and so forth. So I called my dad. I said, hey, we got to find a way that we could get people the resources that they need to be able to pull this thing off. So I just started having him write checks. So he starts writing checks to my friends who are adopting. He calls me about 5 adoptions in, is like, this is not sustainable. We have to come up with a better solution.
Yeah.
So I said, this is in 2010 or so. I said, there's a concept out there called crowdfunding that's sort of kind of kicking off. It's finding it's like dark corners of the web that's happening. I said, what if we created a crowdfunding platform and then families could fund their adoptions back then it was called micro lending. Kiva was really the first of its kind. GoFundMe, Kickstarter, none of that existed at the time. It was all kind of happening at the same time, but Kiva was doing these micro loans. And I said, what if you just did a micro donation and then you could gather up enough money to be able to pay for your adoption? My dad is a database engineer and my dad is a software engineer, so he can deploy software. He's the perfect guy for me to call with this idea. We had it in our mind, when I go back to just write songs, we had it in our mind, we would just help 25 families a year. That was the goal. We can do 25 families a year. We would look at each other like, how do we get to help 25 families adopt their kids? That, to us, that felt like, my dad, I remember, was walking to the grocery store and he called me and he said, I think I'm going to help more people through AdoptTogether in a year than I've helped through the kids in my family in my lifetime. And I thought, wow, that's cool. Like we're going to get to kind of, and it was a cool project that I got to do with my dad. So he and I funded it together. We paid for everything. We went around, I went around and spoke, and I threw my 30th birthday party. We raised money for that family. I said, don't give me any gifts. Just give $30 to this family. We helped fully fund their adoption. And we were off to the races, literally assuming that we would be helping 25 families a year. And sure enough, in our first year, we helped over 125 families.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
Which was just like 125. I didn't have that many friends.
I think you were on the right path. Yeah.
So,
I think that was a sign.
And then we just kept going and going and going and going and going from there. And now here we are with, over 5,000 families that have utilized the platform. We had over 1,000 families last year raise funds. So it's just been amazing to watch AdoptTogether sort of bridge that gap of families who want to create that stable environment and that growth environment, and donors who say, I might not be ready, or I am ready, or I already have kids, or adoption's not for me, but I can get behind and support this family who does want to do that.
I know that we support we have events and stuff like that we have, but I think there's also simple ways that they can support AdoptTogether too. How can people listening support?
I think 3 easy ways. One is, the first thing you can do is you can find a family online and you can just promote it to your audience. Grab a family on AdoptTogether.org and say, I love this family story, and share it. You could have them on a podcast. If you have a podcast, have that family come and tell their story. If you have a church or if you have a group, hey guys, let's raise money for this family. I think that's the easiest way. The second way is we actually just launched a new tool. It's a dollar matching tool. So if you have, let's say, the Keep It Simple, Sexy podcast, you would pick a family and donate $500, right, to that family's dollar matching token. Then every time someone comes in and donates, they're going to see that Keep It Simple, Sexy is matching every dollar up to $500. So you'll be a part of every donation, and that family then can have up to $3 matchers. So somebody could show up to that family's profile and be like, every $100 I give is really $400 because there's hundreds of dollars coming through anyways. So
amazing. So we'll do that. I'll put that in the feed, guys. We'll figure that one out and put it in the feed. Yeah.
If you have a company, or if you're just out there like, you know what, I'm going to spread a few $1,000s across a few families and just watch the donations happen. What we find is that we're a nonprofit. A person is more likely to give up to 60% more, almost twice as much more if it's a tax deductible donation for them. So if I was going to give you $500, I'll give you $1,000 if I get a tax deduction. And people are 3 times more likely to donate if it's multiplied, if it's dollar matched. So our goal now is not just helping families fundraise, but helping them raise more. And so there's some really cool ways that people could get involved and support families in their donations.
That's amazing. Yeah. All you guys have to do is, check them out, because you can go see the families. I think it's nice to see people in person too and really understand who it is that these children will go to. But, you can go to AdoptTogether.org. The families are right there.
Yep.
Even minimal donations, everything counts. And truly, it's not just the families. Really think of these children. And, many of you know Remy Rain, our little Remy Rain that was adopted. And just think how much she's added to our life, but just changing the trajectory, like we're saying, of her life, how smart she is, but how much support she takes. And I always think if she were potentially in some of the, former households, she's so smart that it really takes a lot of hands-on people to support her needs, and so there are so many children out there. And until we basically empty that and give every child a home, hopefully AdoptTogether will be around to help support. But it's a very expensive process. And but there are so many loving families that just need a little extra support financially.
And incentive. I think the other thing that AdoptTogether, I did not expect this, is there are a lot of birth moms that are aware of AdoptTogether and see it and see these family stories. And they say, okay, I know I can trust families, right? Because adoption is this like scary thing. One story, if you have time for it, is we had adopted 4 kids as a family. We were at a Thanksgiving dinner. And we were at the Thanksgiving like brunch at my grandmother's house, and my grandmother's like a collector of lots of random people. So a lot of these random people had driven in from Cleveland, of all places. And a woman walked up to my mom and said, hey, I know about what you do. And I wondered if I could talk to you for a second. And my mom was like, of course. And she said, I just want to let you know that I'm pregnant. I'm 19, and if you will adopt my baby, I will carry my baby to term. And my mom was like, you don't even say anymore. Like, whatever you need, I'm with you. And she starts to ask her about her story and who the baby is and who she is. This is literally their first meeting ever. And I have got to zoom back a little bit. Every time a child came into our life, my mom would have like a dream or some moment. She would have some premonition about the child.
Yeah.
My mom was reading the Bible over and over and over and kept coming across the name John. Okay. So she tells us, hey guys, I think we're going to adopt a baby named John. So we're like, John, okay, this is cool. Like we just like sort of waiting for this like mom to come out of the temple and tell us that baby is going to be named John. So his name's John. Then she says, in my dreams, I keep seeing the country India. So we're going to adopt a boy named John from India. So we're like, I don't know, I was 12 or 13 or something. I was like, and I start like telling my friends in the baseball team, yeah, we're going to adopt another baby. Oh, who is he? His name's John. He's from India. Oh yeah, where is he? I don't know. Just like my mom got this message. She's on a mission from God. And so exactly, my mom starts, there's no internet then, so we couldn't Google it. So you have to get like these pamphlets and call numbers and go. So can't find an agency in India, can't find a child to be matched with, can't find any of that. At this Thanksgiving dinner, this woman walks up to my mom and says, I'll carry my baby to term if you will adopt. And my mom said, of course. She said, tell me about the father. She said, well, the father is engaged to someone else, but he's actually adopted. He was adopted from India, and his name is John. And my mom is like, you don't even know the half of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were supposed to meet today, and so that is my little brother, and my little brother came to our family. We were there at the hospital when he was born. We've been a good relationship with everybody. His birth mother, he was in his birth mom's wedding. He's still very close with everybody, and I think we don't realize when you're living out your adoption story that you do inspire people who one day consider adoption not only for their life, but consider choosing adoption for their children. And I just don't think you have any understanding when you're doing a thing, what those kind of unintended consequences are, to look around and realize that there are people paying attention, because families are such a special, special thing. We took it for granted. I grew up in the Midwest where everybody's a family and everyone does their thing. And I think growing up in an intensity place like LA, where we joked about marriage before, but that family just starts to look really, really differently. And when you have a tight family unit that loves each other, man, you just don't realize how special that is and what a powerful vehicle that is to helping kids become intelligent.
And yet how different it can look. I mean, that's one thing too that I've learned, growing up in the Midwest too, family was like a certain way.
Yes.
And now, just with the way the world is nowadays, and also living in a bigger city and stuff like that, family is all sorts of people. Sometimes it's like a mom, an aunt, a whatever, but it is a support system. And it is
totally.
love.
Two dads. We had two dads on their seventh adoption.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Two dads just adopted 7, and you go, so you
7?
go. Yeah. So you look back and go,
good for them.
God
bless them.
My conservative upbringing in the Midwest, like, I don't know about it. You aren't taking care of those 7 kids. So don't you dare create the stability. We're talking about kind human beings taking care of and bringing kids into their home who come with all sorts of things, right? They got lots of backgrounds and baggage and things that they're walking into your household with. And you take a deep breath and go, all right, this is our baggage now.
This is my mission. Yeah.
That's right.
This is our path now at this point.
That's right.
I love it. I mean, I guess today's episode is just purely about the love that we can provide and how to start seeing families a little bit differently, start seeing our society a little bit differently, and how we can truly support all of the above, and especially just getting it down to, little children. You have the picture of the child behind you today. If you guys are tuning in, you can see it on our YouTube. It's beautiful. And my kids around me right now, and you have two beautiful little girls. We understand how much that they're worth, and just how hard it is, how simple it is, though, too, at the same time. Love and happiness.
The one thing I think
water.
The simplicity of it is anybody can help any family. Yeah. You don't have to sit here, listen to this podcast and go, okay, am I ready to foster a child? Am I old enough, or do I have enough resources to adopt? The reason we created World Adoption Day, the reason we created AdoptTogether, is so that anybody at any stage of life with any amount of resources can lean in and support a family and support that child. And I think that's the simplest part of it, is we want to live in a world. A society is measured by how it takes care of its weak and its children and its helpless. And for the society that we are all living in, that we are all leaving with our children and the generation after us, man, I hope we're people that are just aggressive about making sure we take care of the little ones.
I love that. I'm going to leave it right there, guys.
Perfect.
You can follow Hank at Hank. He must have been the first person on Instagram. And you can follow AdoptTogether at AdoptTogether on Instagram as well, or just head over to AdoptTogether.org. Like we said, check it out. As little and as big as you can do. We've provided tons of ideas. We'll make sure to put it in the feed as well. And we are definitely going to support at the Keep It Simple Sexy podcast. So we'll figure that out, put it in our feed too. Hank, thank you. You've used your life to help so many, and not just any old folk, but our children. And with the support of loving family, it changes the trajectory of each child's life, what they offer to the world, and in turn, our greater society. It takes a beautiful heart to dedicate their life to this. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you're subscribed, and feel free to share this with a friend or family who needs to hear it. Have questions you need answered? Text me at 1-310-361-8697. Make sure you're following me on social at Christine Bullock, and have a healthy, happy week. See you next time.